Hey, thanks, Shiloh. Awesome job. I hope everybody has had an amazing 2021 11th annual Silicon Valley Bike Coalition Summit. This has just been awesome. I hope you've learned a lot and you're taking away lots of new ideas and energy to bring back to communities and organizations as we continue this crusade to make biking safer and more accessible for everybody. So we're glad you're here for the rapid fire session. We've got some great content today. And as Shiloh said, this is probably one of the most fun sessions. I will introduce our amazing 5 speakers shortly. But before I do, I wanted to give everybody an overview of how the rapid fire works. Think of it as your TED Talk of the Bike Summit. We're going to provide a lot of content in a very short amount of time. Every speaker, we've got 5 speakers, gets precisely, get this, 20 slides, and each slide will fire away for only 20 seconds each. So that means every single speaker is on a really tight timeline. In under 7 minutes, they will be finished. There'll be some audio reminders throughout the presentation. So we'll hear a little bell at the 3-minute remaining mark, and then another bell at the 2-minute and 1 minute. And then it is my job to throw the hammer down to the speakers if they're running over to pull you off so that the next speaker can start and we can keep this session right on time. For members of the audience who have questions, there's going to be terrific questions that come up. Please put those questions in the chat. And at the end, we'll probably have about 10 minutes where I will moderate Q&A based on the questions that you put in the chat. So that's basically how the session's going to work. We hope you have a great time and learn a lot. The rapid fire is sort of the opportunity to provide content that all of you were asking for. That's sort of the catch-all. This is just an opportunity to have a really eclectic panel that will teach all of us a lot about some great innovations in their particular space. So before I introduce our first speaker, I'd be remiss if I didn't just briefly introduce myself. As Shiloh mentioned, I'm a council member in the city of Burlingame. My name is Emily Beach. I'm a former mayor there. I have been a huge fan of the Bike Coalition and a member since 2015 when I was first elected. I'm a cyclist, and I am a passionate advocate for both active transportation and public transportation. And most of my policy work focuses on transportation infrastructure and sustainability. And I'm honored to be in my 2nd year of chairing our San Mateo County Transportation Authority, which really invests in transportation infrastructure throughout the county. So without further ado, thank you for joining us. And I'm delighted to introduce our first speaker today, Phillip Kobernick, who will tell us about his organization's e-bike rebate program. So Phillip is the Energy Programs Manager for Peninsula Clean Energy. He leads key transportation electrification initiatives for Peninsula Clean Energy, including fleets, EV charge management, e-mobility, and infrastructure innovation. Phillip, get us started. Take it away.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm going to put on my timer here so I make sure that I'm having the exact right amount. All right. Boom. Okay, so thanks everyone for having me. I designed our e-bike rebate program, and I hope this is going to be helpful for advocates. It's going to have a lot of fast data, so just kind of hang on. And I'll make the presentation available afterwards. So Peninsula Clean Energy is the official electricity provider for San Mateo County. We're a public agency, and as of this year, we are 100% greenhouse gas free, which we're really, really excited about. The way it works, if you haven't heard of Peninsula Clean Energy, is that we go out and develop new renewable energy projects, mostly solar and wind. The power comes to you from PG&E still, and you pay your bill through PG&E. And if you live in San Mateo County, you're almost surely one of our customers and getting clean energy from us. As a mission-driven public agency, we have a goal to decarbonize San Mateo County, and that's not just through renewable energy, that's also through the programs that we provide, and that includes building electrification, transportation electrification, and resiliency. And my focus is on transportation electrification, which is where we'll talk about e-bikes. So why e-bikes? E-bikes are great. They make biking more accessible. There's some academic literature that shows that they replace car trips, but price is still a major barrier for folks. And so we wanted to try electrification beyond just cars and expand e-mobility for our customers to reduce emissions. And so here's an overview of our program. Our board approved $240,000 in incentives, so $800 per bike, up to 300 bikes. It's exclusively for low to moderate income residents of San Mateo County. We had great bike shop partnerships, and we launched during Bike Month of May 2021 and sold out within a week. So here's some info on applicant eligibility. We had an income cutoff at 400% of the federal poverty level, which this table on the right shows. And we also really tried to streamline it for customers. So if they were participating in another program like CalFresh or affordable housing or a care discount, we would accept that as proof of income. Here are some of the bikes that were eligible in our program. They had to be new. And I think one of the sticky points possibly is that we focused on bikes less than $1,800 because we really tried to get the out the door price under $1,000 for folks to go home with an e-bike. So we focused on the more affordable range. And our rebate structure, which I'm really proud of, is it really encouraged point of sale discounts. So here's an example from one of our bike shops where you'll see they took the $800 right off point of sale discount, which really made it a lot easier for folks to be able to afford. They didn't have to buy it and then apply for a rebate afterwards for the most part. Here are fantastic bike shops. We work with Ride Panda, Sports Basement, Mike's Bikes, and Summit Cycles. We could not have done this without them. And again, they were able to provide the rebate as a point of sale discount through the partnerships that we worked on with them. So big thank you to everyone at these shops. One of the things that we wanted to look at was how often do people use financing, and does this help people afford an e-bike? And so this is kind of the buy it now, pay for it later model. And to my surprise, only 5% of people in our program use financing. So it's possible that we just did a good job at reducing the cost enough that folks didn't feel like they needed to do that. Okay, you're going to get a bunch of data now. This is from our trailing survey. We actually have over 50 responses now, but still a relatively small number. And some of the highlights, people are going far on their e-bikes, 10 to 11 miles, 40 minutes, 12 miles when replacing a car trip, which is really great. And so you're going to get a lot of data coming up. So hang on. So looking at intended use versus actual use, the biggest surprise for me is that people are using them more for recreation than they thought before they bought their bike, and less for general errands than they thought. But commuting and general transportation were generally consistent from before they bought the bike until after they bought the bike. And then their experience with biking. So most folks, I think this is a surprise, 3 in 4 people had a non-electric bike at home before they bought their e-bike, but 1 in 5 people didn't have any bikes at home before they bought their e-bike. So that's pretty neat, but most people did have, a working bike at home, so they had some experience. Now, experience with e-bikes, over half of folks had not had any experience with an e-bike before they bought one. 1 in 5 tried one of their friends or neighbors' bikes, which is pretty great. And then 15% used some kind of bike share, like electrified bike share, as their experience in e-bikes before they bought one. All right, now here's our big slide. E-bikes are replacing car trips. We verified this. So 3/4 of folks replaced a car trip at least once a week, with most of them doing them regularly. And transit, for the most part, is pretty non-affected. BART and Caltrain, not at all. And then some people replace bus trips with an e-bike, but for the most part, really, it's car trips that are being reduced. And here's another data point on there. E-bikes are increasing overall biking, which is really great. So folks say that 55% of folks are driving less on a day-to-day basis. And then there's a 5 times increase for folks riding even a non-electric bike after they bought their e-bike 2 to 3 times a week. So e-bikes are increasing overall bike usage, which is cool. And e-bike users are using their bikes regularly. So 2/3 of folks are using their e-bikes at least 2 to 3 times a week. 17% are using them daily. So they are using their bikes a lot, which is great. Really fantastic. And my last slide here is overall recap. So we received 451 applications for our program. As of Monday, we've sold, or 250 people have bought their bikes. We've had a 94% pre-purchase customer satisfaction, and we've confirmed people are seriously reducing car trips through their e-bikes. So we have some verified data on that. And of course, we're getting great photos from folks using them, which is awesome. So again, that was a lot of data. My hope is that it was helpful for advocates and city officials who are thinking of doing something similar. And I'm very happy to make all this available for folks afterwards, or answer any questions that folks have based on our experience running this program. And thank you for having me.
Phillip, awesome presentation, and you even came in a couple seconds early, so you did awesome, and this is really inspiring stuff. I'm sure many members of the audience have questions. Please put them in the chat. We'll consolidate, and at the end, when we go into Q&A, we'll have an opportunity to ask Phillip some questions. But in the meantime, we're going to move on to speaker number 2. We've got Reid Bogert next, and he will present on the San Mateo Countywide Sustainable Streets Master Plan. Reid is the Stormwater Program Specialist for the City County Associations of Governments in San Mateo County, otherwise known as CCAG. Reid is all about innovative green stormwater infrastructure, and his background is in sustainability and conservation. He's worked on programs like this here in the Bay Area and Chicago, where he completed his master's degree in environmental science and policy at the University of Chicago. Reid, thanks for being with us. Take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. I'm Reid Bogert, work with CCAG. CCAG is actually primarily the congestion management agency of San Mateo County, but we work on stormwater as well. So I'm going to share about our Sustainable Streets Master Plan. Why a Sustainable Streets Master Plan and why a bowl of muesli? I'm hoping to share less about what sustainable streets are and what the plan is, more about why sustainable streets are useful and what tools are needed to get them started. Muesli is my favorite breakfast. I could go into a lot of detail about why. It's mostly about the integration of all those great ingredients, which sustainable streets are an integration of things. In essence, sustainable streets are the combination of complete streets and green streets to manage stormwater runoff. They are essentially helpful at managing climate change as well in terms of increased runoff. So a significant benefit of sustainable streets is making roads safer and more comfortable for all users. Sustainable streets can include adding designated bike lanes, reducing driving lanes and roadway width to slow traffic, buffering bicyclists and pedestrians from vehicles, and using things like stormwater curb extensions and planters to do that. Sustainable streets can make biking more than just a recreational activity, which is important, by connecting bike corridors for commuters while maintaining, even improving other road amenities like parking, parallel parking as shown in this image, using pervious paving. Sustainable streets can also offer downtown avenues an opportunity to become more desirable places to visit and spend time outdoors by integrating pedestrian improvements, establishing bikeways, creating beautifully landscaped stormwater features, and those can include things like street trees for shading and cooling. Climate change will lead to significant increases in rainfall. In some places throughout the county, undersized storm drain infrastructure could cause localized flooding of streets and roadways and the transportation infrastructure. So sustainable streets can help manage the impacts of larger future storms and ensure our active transportation network can still serve. There are many types of transportation improvements with different options for integrating green streets infrastructure. And from left to right on this graphic, these are types of sustainable streets projects that range in complexity in terms of implementation and funding, from intersection improvements to connectivity projects to full streetscape redesigns and frontage improvements adjacent to redevelopment projects. To help cities go after funding, the plan does include 12 project concepts like this one. Demonstrates the plan view of proposed improvements and a nice cross section of the integrated complete streets elements. So these are the nice graphics that help move towards implementation. To evaluate opportunities for sustainable streets, it's really important to look at where projects are needed most from a transportation vulnerability perspective and a climate vulnerability standpoint. So this ensures that the highest priority projects serve the areas in greatest need. And planning for sustainable streets at scale requires coordination, in this case among 21 agencies in San Mateo County. And so here you can see the outputs after evaluating active transportation plans among the municipalities for high leverage opportunities to integrate green infrastructure, and then running those opportunities through co-benefit criteria. And we wanted to develop the tools for municipalities in San Mateo to make sustainable streets a reality, including additional resources to better plan for building green infrastructure into sustainable streets. And we hope that other agencies will leverage these tools in their own areas. So we're hoping to share the useful tools and resources. And getting from concept to project requires more technical tools like typical details for design. And this is especially true of sustainable streets, since most details out there would maybe include bike or pedestrian improvements or green infrastructure separately, but not combined. So we brought those elements together. It's helpful to have a way to visualize progress and quantify the benefits of sustainable streets. So this mapping and tracking tool quantifies climate change and water quality benefits associated with sustainable streets. and other green infrastructure. This could be expanded to include other goals of active transportation and tracking progress towards those goals. And another opportunity to get creative with funding, which is really key, is to get the private sector involved. And for example, Facebook recently paid for a sustainable street makeover in Menlo Park. Other cities around San Mateo are doing similar things through new ordinances and other policy mechanisms. So this is a before and after of that street. And CCAG is helping too. Pitching in through our organization, CCAG recently helped fund 10 integrated safe routes to school and green street infrastructure projects throughout the county. So you may see some of these in your neighborhood. Here are a few examples of those integrated projects, really nice. And storytelling is a big part of getting the word out on sustainable streets. So aside from the mapping and tracking tool I just showed, there are some great resources, interactive things on our website, flowstobay.org, including a story map of sustainable streets and other green infrastructure projects throughout the county. So I encourage you to take a look at those. And then to take it a step further, we're engaging the community with a pilot Green Street Stewardship Program in partnership with the Master Gardeners of San Mateo. And green infrastructure doesn't do well if it just gets built. It really needs to be maintained over time to thrive. And so we're hoping to engage in this partnership to help cities maintain their systems, but also achieve their education goals. And so what does your sustainable street look like? What matters most to you? Are you satisfied with Cheerios? No offense there. Are you aiming for the full bowl of muesli there? Is it climate change, safety, mobility, accessibility, environmental benefits? And so I encourage you to visit our website to learn more and get engaged. And I'll leave you with this one last image of a sustainable street project on Carolyn Avenue in Burlingame. Really beautiful project as the vision for what many of our streets could look like if we decide to make them safer, greener, and more resilient. So thank you. I'll leave it there and appreciate your listening.
Thanks, Reid. Great presentation. I have to say, I love that last slide in Burlingame. That was a great slide. No, fantastic, just inspiring stuff. And again, if you have questions for Reid or about sustainable streets, please put them in the chat. We'll collect them at the end, and during Q&A, we will ask our speakers some great questions from the audience. Our third speaker is Nayantara Narasimhan, who will present on transit hubs in low-income neighborhoods. Nayantara is the Transit Hub Manager at First Community Housing. She leads a collaboration between First Community Housing and Transform that provides residents with easy and affordable access to multiple transportation methods, including electric vehicles, electric bicycles, bike share, and transit passes, all in order to help break down socioeconomic barriers. Such important work. She earned a bachelor's degree in public health with a minor in communication studies from San Jose State University. Nayan, go ahead and take it away. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. So I'm really excited to be here with you all. I work with First Community Housing. For those of you who don't know, we are an affordable housing developer located in the Bay Area. We build permanent supportive housing for low-income populations and run a variety of resident programs that connect our tenants to resources to get in the community. We keep sustainability as our core focus. Our resident programs strive to create green, healthy, and equitable communities. They range from topics such as healthy food access, digital literacy, alternative transportation, of course, and we really hope to bring all these resources to our tenants at an affordable rate, if not free. So what are transit hubs? When we were toying with the idea of creating transit hubs, we really wanted to get people out of their cars and into alternative transportation. And how did we do that? We tried to get as many transportation resources as possible, condensed and available in one area to make it easier for our residents to have access to a variety of these resources. And we work towards making it equitable, catering to our various resident populations. Our populations range from people with developmental disabilities, to seniors, to family properties, to people that are coming out of chronic homelessness. So it's really important for us to tailor make these programs to serve the populations effectively. How do we do that? We create a needs assessment. So for one of our properties, we were able to give a transportation survey that allowed us to gauge what people's current transportation practices were, but also gauge what they wanted to have access to, what they were eager to learn more about, and what they wanted to have that were barriers that were there that were preventing them from having access to that. So one of our first transportation programs, and that has been long lasting, is a Smart Pass program that allows us to give free Smart Passes to our residents in Santa Clara County, which allows them to have free rides and unlimited rides on VTA buses and light rails. This has been super helpful for residents, especially for those who don't have their own independent form of transportation. We're also a huge advocate for bike programs. We have a variety of bike workshops from our partner organizations on safety and maintenance that allow residents to really use bicycling as a solid form of alternative transport. And we really work towards not just having access to bicycles for our residents, but also approaching it from a more holistic perspective where they have the educational tools and resources necessary for them to use it as a more sustainable long-term practice for transportation that's not just green, but is also healthy for them as well. And, luckily, we have a lot of partner organizations that help us with that. From a development perspective, we also look to provide amenities that propagate transportation. And so bike storage is a huge part of that. It's part of our planning process when we're creating new properties, and it's something that's added to properties that may not have it. So having a safe space for residents to store their transportation is key for us. Now, I mentioned that we wanted to build sustainable and equitable communities, but that's not only from the perspective of creating green communities for the environment, but creating sustainable changes that will last long-term and make it super easy for residents to inculcate these practices in their daily life and create equitable communities while we're working towards this. How do we do that? We have community meetings. Community meetings are a great way to bring residents together to interact with one another. And we also use that as a great way to get resident feedback through every step of our program planning process to make sure that their needs are really the key focus and that they're being met as we're doing these programs for them. We also have bike rides. SVBC has been a huge, huge help in this regard. We've had several bike rides with them that allow a great event for people to come together, create that sense of community. It's a great way for people to get out, be active, interact with one another, explore the city together, and also promote alternative transportation. And from the equity lens, I think it's super important for us to look at transportation from equity because a huge barrier is income versus access to these resources. And so we work with programs that cater specifically to low-income populations like Bike Share for All, which has been super helpful for our residents to get access to that resource. We're seeing similar programs that cater to low-income people in the e-scooter programs that are there. And this really helps us fight the idea that someone's income level should not define if they have access to a resource or not, and it should be something that is equally accessible regardless of income. Living in the Silicon Valley, technology is a huge part of everything we do, and we're increasingly seeing that in transportation as well. So transit screens prove to be a wonderful resource to bridge that gap for people who don't have access to smart data, but can see it in real life in a community room to see transportation live updates so that they can plan their trips accordingly. One of our new programs at one of our sites is the idea of residents purchasing their own EVs through rebate programs and having their own charger assigned to them. This is relatively new, and it's a wonderful way for residents to also have access to their own electric vehicles. And I'm happy to say that one resident has already purchased their own EV, and it's been such a blessing to see it rolled out. We're also working on car sharing, electric car sharing as a program. This is still in the works through a grant with Transform and Envoy, and we really hope to bring this as a new innovative resource for our residents so that they can kind of test the waters with newer forms of green transportation. Now, from the idea of tackling this transit hub for different populations, it can be as simple as creating a dashboard. This really gives us a visualization of what our populations need, what our populations already have, and how we can tailor make these transit hubs to best serve each population's needs based on the feedback that we get from them. So I'm going to leave you all with 4 very important takeaways. Number 1, resident input is crucial. We got to hear them every step of the way. We have to partner with organizations to bridge that gap between access and income level. We have to think sustainably, not just in terms of being green for the environment, but for long-term changes. And we absolutely need funding and support for this. Otherwise, these programs don't last. So thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Nyan. Another great presentation to, I think I hadn't unmuted myself properly. Thank you for another great presentation, Diane. It was just awesome. Totally inspiring. Again, if you have questions, please put them in the chat and we will be sure to get all our speakers to answer them towards the end of our Q&A session after all speakers have a chance to do their presentations. Our fourth speaker today is Karsten Adam, who will present information about how to integrate bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure into freeway interchange redesign projects. And this is really an area that needs more visibility. And thanks so much to the Bike Coalition for amplifying this issue along the way over the past few years. Karsten is a project manager, highway program at VTA. He has more than 20 years of experience in civil engineering and design and management with a focus on transportation projects, including freeway interchanges and corridors, multimodal facilities, and highways. He's an expert in Caltrans design standards, which is saying something because they are complicated. He also is an expert in complete streets and green streets projects. Thanks so much for being with us today, Karsten.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Hopefully I can keep up with the breakneck speed here of these presentations. Okay, so it's going to go to the next slide. There we go. Okay, so I'm just going to get a quick overview of the VTA Measure B program. It was approved by Santa Clara voters in 2016. It's a 30-year half-cent sales tax measure supporting transportation projects and services. There's 9 separate programs, so I'll just be focusing on the highway interchange category. So this is basically the VTA bicycle and pedestrian category is separately programmed to receive up to $250 million over the life of the program, while the highway interchange program will receive up to $750 million. So far, the highway program has expended about $45 million in right-of-way construction activities. So with this slide, I want to see how much text I could possibly squeeze in one slide. The top wording is from the VTA board memo requiring Measure B capital programs to include complete street requirements. The text on the left basically defines what the complete streets are, and the right side is basically a sample complete streets checklist. So these are just examples of backup displays that go in the complete streets checklist that's required for every Measure B project. Includes conditions for pedestrians, bicyclists, and transit users, and describes improvements that the users will experience from the project. This can all be seen on the VTA website. So all VTA approved interchanges are within Caltrans right-of-way, so the standard Caltrans project development process must be followed. Project alternatives begin at called the PID phase, then it transitions to the environmental or PA and ED phase, where BPAC input, and then it moves to the final design phase of PS&E. So as with most complete street projects, there's always a balance of accommodating vehicles, pedestrians, and bicyclists within right-of-way and funding constraints. So the project's purpose in each statement and input from stakeholders really develop the design as it moves from alternatives analysis through to the final design. So the next series of slides give a quick overview of 5 different VTA interchange projects and how they incorporate multimodal designs. So working from north to south in US 101, this first one is 101-237 Matilda system in Sunnyvale that recently completed construction. So the next slide will zoom into the right side of it. So at the 237 portion, there's essentially a straight buffered bike lanes that connect straight through Matilda, left to right is shown in purple. A sidewalk is shown on the bottom side in blue. And then there's a class 1 path shown on the right in green that connects through the project along Moffett Park Drive. So then here's an actual aerial image of the same location showing how the recently completed project looks. Overall, it's a more traditional design that has bike and pedestrian crossings at the same grade as the roadways, with enhanced green striping across some of the longer bike crossing routes. Moving to the south, this is the 101 Trimble project, which is just north of San Jose Airport runways. The project will be starting construction soon, and it shifts all ped bike travel through the interchange to the north with a class 1 path there with Central Expressway to the left, Guadalupe River Trail on the right. So this zooms into the left side. Central is on the left with an at-grade crossing that includes a bike-only signal phase. And then moving to the right, the path transitions to go underneath the southbound 101 ramps, and then it loops back up and over the Trimble structure to go over 101. So at the southern end of San Jose, this is the 101 Blossom Hill project that is currently in the early phase of construction. Similar to 101 Trumbull, this project shifts ped bike travel to the northern side of the interchange with the Class 1 path. And the path crosses under southbound 101 ramps on the left. On the right side, it goes over. So here zoomed in on the right side where the path goes over. There's just enough room for the path to go from Coyote Road up and over the northbound 101 on-ramp. So this provides a nice direct connection for pedestrians and bicyclists and connection to the Coyote Creek Trail, which is further to the right. And this basically just shows a rendering of the proposed wall treatments along the path under the southbound 101 ramps. And it keeps the views nice and open for safety and security. And this project was actually led by the city of San Jose for the design, and Vta was just brought in to implement the construction. So just south of Gilroy, this is the 1125 Phase 1 interchange project, which is in the final design. The project improves connectivity for bicyclists that currently have to travel on the shoulder of 101 in this area because there aren't other routes. So one of the main improvements would be providing a new path. So this is zooming in on the upper image of the display. It's a little hard to see, but the purple is a separated bike path that connects to the interchange on the left and then local Castro Valley Road on the right. So it allows a nice, safe bicycle connection between the two without having to get on the shoulder of 101. And this last project here is 280 Wolf near the new Apple campus in Cupertino. This project is also currently in final design and provides at-grade but buffered bike lanes and sidewalks along each side of the interchange crossing over 280. The next side will zoom in to the right side. So here's kind of a close-up. There's limited right-of-way to work within for this interchange. So the bicycle and pedestrian crossings of the ramps are squared up as much as possible to lower vehicle speeds and improve visibility. And just for reference, the Apple Spaceship campus is just to the right and lower of that image. So closing out the slides are some renderings of amenities along the bike path and sidewalk to provide a buffer for vehicles. As Reid mentioned earlier, we have some green streetscaping to provide kind of a visual buffer and to treat stormwater runoff where possible. And this last slide is basically showing amenities along the bridge structure over 280. This was brought to the Cupertino BPAC for input in the design, but with most of the interchange projects, Vta has multimodal subject matter experts that review these designs and participate in the meetings throughout the project development process. Okay, that's all I have. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Karsten. It's just such a great reminder for all of us that highway projects really do have a responsibility to improve the safety for everyone, not just automobiles, but for active transit as well and all modes of transportation. So it's great presentation. And we have our fifth and final speaker before we move into Q&A. So keep those questions coming in the Q&A chat. We have Dan Mitchell with us today. Dan is going to speak to us today about autonomous vehicle design for a better transportation future. In other words, to improve safety for all of us, including cyclists like us. Dan leads city and community engagement at NURO in Mountain View, working with local governments in Arizona, California, and Texas regarding NURO's autonomous vehicle testing and delivery services. Before joining NURO, Dan co-founded Shepherd, a child transportation startup in Boston, and he's also worked extensively in the political arena. So my condolences there, Dan. Dan earned an MBA from UCLA and a BA in political studies from Pitzer College as well. We're looking forward to your presentation, Dan.
Thanks so much, Council Member. Really appreciate that, and really excited to be here. So much great work that the Silicon Valley Bike Coalition is doing with all of these presentations. So much to be hopeful about in the future as we see these projects grow. As the Council Member mentioned, my name is Dan Mitchell. I lead city and community engagement work here at NURO. NURO is an autonomous vehicle company focused on delivery of goods with our autonomous vehicles. And this presentation is going to be focused on how we design a safer vehicle for safer streets. Now, let me go ahead and talk a little bit about why NURO is focused on this delivery service part utilizing these autonomous vehicles, and then how that unlocks these new vehicle designs we're talking about. NURO is a company that's now 5 years old, and we've gone ahead and launched these types of delivery services because we spend a lot of time on errands. You can see here, this is of course pre-pandemic data from the 2017 National Highway Travel Survey. But a lot of folks are actually spending their time in their car running shoppings and errands rather than commuting. And the way we shop today is not sustainable. There's a number of different issues with traffic collisions, environmental damage, the economic strain placed on local businesses, and just a general lack of access as well. And so there's a lot that NURO is trying to tackle with replacing this unsustainable current delivery services, whether that's in personal vehicles or with delivery services. But for today's conversation, I really do want to focus on the traffic collisions that we're seeing and kind of why this autonomous technology is working. We've seen an increase, actually, even though there's been 13% fewer miles driven in 2020, there was a 7% increase in traffic fatalities on our roadways, a lot of that being vulnerable road users. So autonomous software can help make our roads safer with sensors placed 360-degree vision around the vehicle. This is something that almost all autonomous vehicle companies are working on. The software system will always be alert. It doesn't get tired, it doesn't drive drunk, it doesn't get distracted. I will share our vehicles do text and drive. They do text the customer that their order is on its way, but of course that doesn't distract the autonomous software system as it's observing the area around it. And then finally, the autonomous software is programmed to be a cautious defensive driver and really follow the rules of the road. We've seen a lot of instances of hooking where, vehicles will speed up and try to make a right-hand turn as a cyclist is going by. NURO and other autonomous software will drive more defensively. But that's not the only thing that we're doing. NURO is utilizing the benefits of the autonomous software to unlock the ability to build a vehicle with no one inside of it, further redesigning the vehicle to protect what's on the outside rather than anything that's on the inside of the vehicle. This is R2, our zero occupant vehicle, designed specifically for delivery services. Again, there is no one inside this vehicle. It's a right side solution for a new sustainable neighborhood delivery service that really fits within our communities. This is a little bit more detail on the R2 vehicle. We'll spend a couple moments on this slide as we go through the deck, kind of talking about the design. You can see on the right side some of our sensors and technology labeled on the vehicle. But the general idea here is this narrow width of the vehicle allows more space for cyclists and other road users, allowing us to navigate these neighborhood streets where we're doing these deliveries in a responsible way. It also has a pedestrian friendly or protection on the front end, rather than a traditional vehicle that has a heavy engine block, hood, windshield that's meant to protect someone inside the vehicle. This front end is meant to protect folks outside the vehicle. And then you can see that this vehicle's purpose is built with the doors on the curb side, avoiding curbing incidents when folks are opening the door into the roadway. We want to keep customers protected, as well as cyclists and other folks on the roadway protected by only addressing the front side of the vehicle. We're really excited about the potential that this technology has and what we're working on. We're actively building, testing, and deploying these vehicles today. We've made a lot of progress in our first 5 years here. So today on the roadway, you actually will see the R2 vehicle. We have done some testing operations in California and Arizona. And if folks haven't seen Domino's Pizza, we have a pilot with them that we're running in Houston, Texas, where folks are getting pizza delivery today, actually with the NURO R2 vehicle. It's a really cool avoid the noid ad that they have running online that you can take a look at. We also, especially in Silicon Valley, do have Prius vehicles on the roadway. These are vehicles that we use for our early mapping, software testing, and some deliveries. We're actually running some deliveries in the Bay Area right now with Second Harvest Food Bank, doing deliveries to at-home, homebound seniors and low-income individuals. as we're going through this process of research and development and deployment, we feel it's really important to adhere to a number of community operation principles. And so basically, we provide neighborhood education, including this presentation today, about autonomous vehicles and what we're doing in the neighborhoods. We want to make sure we set reasonable levels of vehicle travel on public roadways. We don't want to cause any more congestion than what we're trying to solve. We also do a lot to protect neighborhood privacy when we're on the roadway. Our vehicles, of course, have camera sensors on them so we can see, similar to you driving on the roadway. And so it's something that's really important, is protecting that neighborhood privacy. We have a lot more to come, and we hope that you will continue to learn more. We'll be at the Fun Bike Ride on September 19th at the Guadalupe Trail, where you'll be able to see some of our vehicles and answer questions. You can reach out to me, Dan at NURO.ai, to learn more about what we're doing. And I do want to encourage folks to take a look at our Pioneer program. This is an early tester program to learn more about the vehicles in our area. If you haven't purchased one of those cargo e-bikes yet, this is a great way to stay updated on our future commercial pilots, where you can get groceries or other things delivered directly to your home. Thanks so much for everyone, and excited to take questions and talk more.
Thanks so much, Dan. What a preview into our collective future. There was a comment in the chat about this is very Jetson, and I think that's pretty accurate. So now we've got a couple minutes before we wind down and have Shiloh sort of close the summit, but we've got an opportunity to ask our wonderful speakers and do some Q&A with the great questions that you folks have put in the chat. So I will try to go through and make sure, try to rotate questions for each speaker, but we'll kick off and start with a question for Phillip on the e-bike rebate program. And I think one of the folks, I think it was Lauren, asked about your specific funding source for this e-bike program. And are there also examples of federal, state, and regional transportation funding being used to subsidize the purchase of e-bikes for individuals? And maybe just give a little context, a little bit more about Peninsula Clean Energy specifically, but maybe inspiring how other organizations can do the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question. So we self-funded it at Peninsula Clean Energy. So we fund all of our programs, whether that's our heat pump water heater rebates, our used electric vehicle rebates. By the way, you can get $1,000 off a used EV from us right now. Have to plug that. We just launched that this week, and more if you're a customer with lower income. We fund that all internally. So the way we work as a public agency is essentially what we collect from customers above what we spend on buying energy goes into community investment in decarbonizing San Mateo County. And so this is an example of that. The e-bike program was an example of that. There are other funding sources out there. AQMD, the Air District, has e-bikes as an eligible expense in their Clean Cars for All program. It's a scrap and replace program. So if you're getting rid of a car, you can get money to replace that car with an electric vehicle or an e-bike. Which is great, and it's a really great program. And then, of course, we know that 10 million is coming down the pike in from the state for our next fiscal year. So that's another very exciting one. And we're considering ways that we could do this program again.
Thanks, Phillip. Such a great example of a public agency, not for profit, reinvesting profits back into the community as opposed to those profits going to shareholders. So hooray for CCAs and sustainability. So the next question I'm going to bring to Reid. There was a great question from Julia about, would love to hear more about the master gardener approach to maintenance of this green infrastructure. Seems like involving community members as caretakers of green infrastructure and trees can be an absolutely great way to work. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, yeah, thank you, Julia. We're really in the early stages of getting the pilot program going, but those are essentially the goals. We want to help the cities maintain the green infrastructure because there are limited resources to do that in many cases, while supporting the master gardeners with an educational opportunity. And they do have, they're volunteers, they have requirements to do a certain amount of public engagement through their work. So we started in Half Moon Bay at the library project. There's a new integrated safe routes to school and green infrastructure project there. And CCAG purchased a bunch of neat equipment to do soil sampling, vegetation care, looking at debris removal, and so all of the things that are necessary to maintain the infrastructure, tracking how the plants are doing over time and replacing them as needed. But a big part of the program goal is to engage schools eventually. So those pilot projects are located within about a quarter mile of schools. They're very close. And so if we can start to work with science teachers and get classes involved in learning about climate change and green infrastructure, that's a great learning opportunity, and also supporting the community. One of the challenges that we faced early was just coordinating with municipalities to basically, ensure the safety and liability issues are managed appropriately, having a permit in place to actually get out there and do the stewardship, maybe putting out cones to protect volunteers when they're working in the roadway there. But we're pretty optimistic to expand into another municipality next fall and keep growing it from there. So it's looking good so far, but we're just starting. So
Thanks, Reid. Thanks, Reid. The next question we've got is for Karsten. There are a couple of questions on some of these highway infrastructure projects, and Julia is asking, can you share a little bit more about the PID process with Caltrans, the PID process? What is the typical cost and timeline? And for those of us who aren't quite as well versed in the lingo, I believe that what they're referring to is project initiation documents, so kind of like the scope and the cost, if I've got that right, but please somebody step in, and thanks for answering that question.
Yeah, so sorry, I had to use all the acronyms, that Caltrans loves the acronyms. So yeah, the PID is the project initiation document phase, basically the very beginning of the project development process. And it depends on the size and complexity of the project, but it would take anywhere from a year to 2 years, typically not more than 3 years, depending on how big the project is. Cost-wise, again, it depends on the complexity, but you can just throw out some numbers, like the PID phase around, say, 10% of the total project cost in that ballpark.
Thank you for that insight. We've got a couple of questions for Dan about the NURO vehicle. I'm going to try to rope a couple into one, but people are curious about them. We've got Arnott asking about the maximum speed, whether or not, which it certainly impacts safety. We've got another question about how they respond to emergency vehicles, and also about how the AV technology, how effective or ineffective it can be with seeing people with darker skin tones at night, and how NURO is addressing some of those safety issues.
Yeah, let me try to rapidly run through a lot of those questions. So the NURO vehicle right now is classified as a low-speed vehicle, so it has a top speed of 25 miles per hour. We've seen that exact same data where if you do get into a crash with someone, a vulnerable road user at that lower speed, there's a much higher survival rate. And so we've intentionally built that into our system and into our vehicle process. In fact, the vehicle will travel at or lower than the speed limit on these neighborhood roadways for safe operation. It's also something that pairs really well with our focus on delivery services. The burrito or pizza or groceries in the car doesn't care if it takes a little bit longer to travel at a safe speed. So we can still deliver a really great customer experience and a valuable service while maintaining kind of that roadway safety. On responding to to emergency vehicles, we've done some testing, and we've worked very closely with the Mountain View Police Department, as well as a lot of emergency services in our areas, to make sure our vehicles can detect those emergency vehicles and take appropriate action. We do have things like a microphone on the vehicle that helps us, again, on that customer side, on that delivery operations, but it could also be used to detect the siren systems that we have, knowing that an emergency vehicle is approaching and taking appropriate action. And then lastly, on the question around the sensor technology and being able to detect people of color and other road users out there, we're doing a lot as we develop this tech to test it in a diverse group of neighborhoods and communities. Our delivery service operations right now are operating in Houston, Texas, which is one of the most diverse cities in the country. And so we are not only doing that as we're testing and making sure we're building the right product, the right technology that everyone will be able to use, but we're also adding in special technology like thermal imaging cameras to really put that extra emphasis on vulnerable road users, or even just our pets and other animals in the community as well, to make sure we're really doing everything we can to detect and layer that in as an extra safety approach on there.
Thanks for that, Dan. I think we have time probably for, well, let me see. Shiloh, are you on? Do we have time for one more question, or should we wrap in? Is that okay if we take one more?
Let's do one more real quick.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions on the e-bike program. We had a question from Eris from Sonoma Clean Power. Did the program actually, did Peninsula Clean Energy program restrict to local bike shops, or could people actually purchase them online for a cheaper price? Because there could be some resistance. And did people who actually signed on to this program understand how expensive e-bikes were, and were they actually converted into sales, not just, oh, I'll take the program?
Yeah, really, really, really great question. So we had 260 bikes have already been purchased. So we had a really good conversion rate. One of the differences between us and Sonoma is that we had a really successful partnership with an online retailer called Ride Panda. So they're San Francisco based, and we set up our Salesforce system and a lot of backend like technical stuff that allowed them to offer the rebate as a point of sale discount for an online sale. So that was a real big help for folks because they had a pretty wide inventory. But we didn't restrict folks that had to be based in San Mateo County. So Sports Basement had some locations in San Francisco and Santa Clara, same with Mike's Bikes. So basically, we try to give people the most flexibility possible when purchasing their bikes, especially given the fact that there are some supply constraints. And we did allow people to go outside the normal process and buy a bike from like Rad Power or electric e-bikes online, and then get reimbursed. So that's the difference. They couldn't use it as a point of sale, they'd have to get reimbursed. But overall, something like 80+% of people bought from a bike shop. So not that many people used that other option, but we did give it so folks would have the most flexibility possible.
Awesome. Virtuous cycle, supporting local businesses and getting people out of their automobiles. Well, thank you all for just a fabulous session. Great speakers. Before we close and pass it back to our fearless leader, Shiloh Ballard, I just want to do a plug. Please, everybody, well, it's awesome to see 100 people still on this last session here, but you all know what that Silicon Valley Bike Coalition is the only organization that's really working for better bicycle infrastructure and policies in both San Mateo and Santa Clara County. So please join me, join our panelists, and become a member today and support through events like this. Continue to on this crusade to make things safer for all modes of transportation. We appreciate the support. Huge thanks to the Silicon Valley Bike Coalition staff. Sandia was incredible, kind of herding all of us cats today for this panel. Emma, Shiloh, Tim, great job, and your extended team. We can't thank you enough for the important work you do day in and day out. Shiloh, pass it back to you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Beach, and to our panelists. That was really wonderful. And I just want to echo what you mentioned, Councilmember, that the SVBC staff is awesome. There's 13 of us working across 2 counties. I often get credit for the work of the summit, but I just show up and I follow their instructions because they do such a great job. So thank you all for joining us. I also just wanted to mention, that hearing about the PCE, the Peninsula Clean Energy e-bike rebate program, they had approached us early on with this idea and wanted some feedback. And we were thrilled when they did. And Councilmember Hale was involved in really shaping the program. And they took our feedback. We said, this is going to be really awesome. And you should include a programmatic element in this, which includes an organization like the Bike Coalition, which helps to get the word out and then gets people doing it. So you've bought your bike, now come out on a bike ride and do it with folks who know what they're doing and can help increase bike confidence. So, all these programs are great. The programmatic cultural behavioral piece of it is also absolutely essential, which also goes to what our friends at First Community Housing are doing, which is, they're building housing for those who need housing, and they're including these programmatic ongoing transportation elements that really help transform how people are getting around. So awesome stuff going around. Thank you all for joining us. As